Vincent yanked his F-37 fighter jet into a barrel roll, dodging a simulated missile, while his radio blared with curse-laden protests from a furious Vidian squadron leader. Primitive humans like Vincent had no business training the galaxy's most advanced alien pilots how to fly. But if the maverick human test pilot couldn't whip these cocky, by-the-book Vidians into shape fast, a bloodthirsty enemy force would crush them all. Colonel Varys glared at Vincent from across the briefing room, his serpentine eyes narrowed to slits in his scaly purple face. "How dare you risk one of our priceless ships with such reckless maneuvers? Your flying today was undisciplined, unacceptable." Vincent scowled back at the arrogant Vidian leader. It had only been a week since the human arrived on their high-tech homeworld, and he was already butting heads with his new trainees. Vincent had a reputation as the craziest, most daring test pilot on Earth. The only reason he agreed to this job was the insane amount of cash the desperate Vidian military offered him. That, and the chance to fly their state-of-the-art fighters. But from day one, Varys and his squadron mates made it clear what they thought of humans. They sneered down their snouts at the primitive ape who presumed to teach them anything. In the Vidians' eyes, they had already mastered space combat. With their ultra-advanced tech, they didn't need creativity or instinct, just strict adherence to time-tested doctrine. Each training session only heightened tensions between Vincent and the aliens. They robotically ran their drills by the book, while the human pushed the boundaries with wild maneuvers and unorthodox tactics. Over and over, Varys rebuked him for his irresponsible flying. But Vincent knew that in real combat, rigid predictability was a death sentence no matter how cutting-edge your tech. He tried to warn the Vidians, but they wouldn't listen. Instead, they grounded Vincent from flying their precious ships during exercises. But their overconfidence was about to cost them everything. Without warning, the enemy force Vincent had been hired to train them against launched a surprise attack on the training base, and the Vidian pilots were woefully unprepared for a real fight. As explosions erupted across the complex, Varys and his panicked squadron rushed to their fighters, but they were sitting tarpons against the enemy's tactical superiority. In a few merciless minutes, most of the Vidian craft were blasted into oblivion. Vincent knew he had to act fast. Lives were at stake. He leapt into the nearest fighter and took off, defying orders as usual. His wild flying style caught the enemy completely off guard, bobbing, weaving, juking in ways they never expected. Vincent picked them off one by one until the attackers retreated in disarray. He had single-handedly turned the tide, but instead of gratitude, Vincent was greeted by an enraged Varys and the Vidian brass. They lit into him for his insubordination and reckless treatment of their ships, seemingly oblivious to how many Vidian lives he had just saved. Furious, Vincent shot back that their stubborn reliance on protocol above skill, instinct, and adaptability would doom them all against this foe. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crept into Varys's eyes. Vincent pressed his point. If the Vidians wanted a fighting chance, they needed to scrap their rigid playbook and let him teach them to fly, for real. Grudgingly, Varys agreed to Vincent's unorthodox training moving forward, but bitter resentment still simmered between them. The threat of another attack loomed, and the Vidians remained far from convinced that this cocky human was their salvation. Vincent had broken the ice, but he still had a hell of a mountain to climb to earn their trust. With the enemy growing bolder by the day, the human and his alien students would need to learn to work together, and fast, or resignation themselves to devastating defeat at the hands of a merciless foe. The battle for the Vidian homeworld was about to begin, and both sides now knew the truth. Superior technology alone wasn't enough. To prevail, these pilots would have to learn to fly like Vincent Bailey. Vincent gritted his teeth as he watched the Vidian pilots struggle with his latest training exercise. He had them flying through a narrow, winding canyon, their advanced sensors deliberately hampered to simulate battle damage. The goal was to navigate the treacherous path using instinct and raw flying skill alone. But one after another, the Vidian fighters scraped against the canyon walls or got caught in the chaotic air currents. In the cockpit of his own jet, Varys cursed loudly as he narrowly avoided a collision. "This is madness," Varys yelled over the radio. "Our ships aren't built for this kind of flying." Vincent rolled his eyes. "You think the enemy cares what your ships are built for? You need to learn to adapt, to push past your limits." He watched as Zaxxon, one of the younger pilots, nimbly weaved his fighter through a particularly tight section of the canyon. The kid was a natural, seeming to anticipate the twists and turns before they happened. "Not bad, Zaxxon," Vincent praised over the comm. "Just like I taught you. Trust your instincts." Back at the base, Vincent put the exhausted pilots through another grueling exercise, mock dogfights with their targeting systems disabled. The Vidians, so used to relying on their superior tech, were left floundering. Varys grew increasingly frustrated, his scales flushing dark purple with anger. But Zaxxon and a few others slowly started to get the hang of it, learning to anticipate their opponent's moves and outfly them, rather than just outshoot them. Vincent felt a flicker of hope. Over the next few days, Vincent pored over specs of the Vidians' fighters and started brainstorming new tactics. He stayed up late, discussing ideas with Zaxxon and some of the other promising rookies. "You ever pull any crazy stunts in these things?" Vincent asked with a grin, patting the hull of a sleek alien jet. Zaxxon blinked his serpentine eyes. "Stunts? That would be a violation of standard operating procedures." Vincent laughed. "Kid, by the time I'm done with you, standard operating procedures will just be a set of guidelines." Day by day, Vincent chipped away at the Vidians' resistance. He cracked jokes during mission briefings, needled them with good-natured insults, and showed off increasingly reckless moves during training flights. Slowly but surely, Vincent started to win them over. Even Varys seemed to be coming around. But Vincent's progress hit a roadblock when Craxus, a rival Vidian squad commander, loudly denounced Vincent's methods in a meeting of the military brass. "It's only a matter of time before this reckless ape gets someone killed," Craxus snarled, glaring at Vincent. "We need to get rid of him and return to our proven training doctrines." The room erupted into heated argument. Vincent watched, expression resolute, as the Vidian leaders debated his fate. But before they reached a decision, an urgent message came in. A Vidian colony was under heavy assault by the enemy. The debate would have to wait. Craxus's squadron was scrambled to respond. Varys's pilots, deemed not ready for real combat by the brass, were ordered to stand down. But Vincent saw the frustrated looks on his students' faces. They were itching to prove themselves. Vincent pulled Varys aside. "You know they need our help. Your pilots are ready. You've seen how far they've come." Varys hesitated, then nodded firmly. "We're going," he declared. "Craxus can court-martial me later." When they dropped out of warp over the besieged colony, the situation was grim. Craxus's squadron was badly outmatched, their fighters being picked off one by one. The enemy's flying was tight and precise, almost mechanical in its lethality. "Engage!" Varys barked to his pilots. The Vidians peeled off into the furball, Vincent hot on their tails. At first, they started to employ standard Vidian tactics, struggling to gain an advantage. But then, almost hesitantly, they started using Vincent's unorthodox maneuvers. A barrel roll here, an inverted turn there. The enemy, thrown off balance, began to slip up. Zaxxon, in particular, was a marvel to behold. He wove his fighter through the chaos like a needle, stitching enemy ships with bursts of plasma fire. When a missile lock alarm blared in Craxus's cockpit, Zaxxon didn't hesitate. He flipped his jet in a physics-defying move and intercepted the missile, saving his superior officer's life. In a matter of minutes, the tide turned. The enemy, faced with the unpredictable flying of Varys's squadron, broke formation and retreated. Vincent let out a whoop of victory over the radio. They had done it. Back on the Vidian homeworld, Vincent stood tall as the military leadership debriefed them on the battle. Even Craxus, looking humbled, admitted that Vincent's training had saved the day. Varys met Vincent's eyes and nodded, a newfound respect glimmering in his gaze. But Vincent knew they couldn't rest on their laurels. The enemy would be back, and in greater numbers. His pilots had tasted their first real victory, but they still had a lot to learn. As he looked out at his ragtag alien squad, battered but proud, Vincent felt a swell of drive. He would forge them into the greatest pilots in the galaxy, no matter what it took. The battle was just beginning. Vincent wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed the smoking wreckage of the mock enemy installation. The Vidian pilots zoomed overhead, their engines screaming as they completed another pass. "Again!" Vincent barked into the comm. "This time I want you to come in low and fast. Use the terrain for cover." Zaxxon's voice crackled back, filled with exhaustion. "We've been at this for hours. The ships can't take much more." "The enemy won't give you a break," Vincent shot back. "Now go!" The fighters swooped down, hugging the contours of the barren landscape. Vincent watched their approach on the tactical display, nodding with approval as they expertly weaved between hills and canyons. But halfway through the run, alarms blared. Vincent had disabled their targeting systems without warning. Chaos erupted as the pilots scrambled to adjust. "What the hell, Vincent?" Varys snarled over the comm. "You're going to get someone killed!" Vincent ignored him, focusing on Zaxxon's fighter as it wobbled dangerously. "Come on, kid. You can do this. Trust your instincts." At the last second, Zaxxon steadied his craft and launched his payload, a direct hit. "Nice work," Vincent said. "Now let's run it again. This time I'm throwing in some bogeys." Varys stormed into the control room, scales flushed dark purple. "Enough! This is insanity. I won't let you endanger my pilots any further." Vincent stood his ground. "Your pilots need to be ready for anything. The enemy won't play fair." "And neither do you," Varys hissed. "I've had it with your reckless stunts. You're relieved of duty." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "Fine. You think you're so much better? Prove it. You and me, one-on-one. If I win, we do things my way." Varys hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Very well. Let's settle this in the air where it belongs." Minutes later, they faced off in the sky. Vincent's aging Earth-built fighter looked like a relic next to Varys's sleek Vidian craft. But as they began their deadly dance, it quickly became clear this was an even match. Vincent barrel rolled, juking to avoid Varys's first salvo. He countered with a tight loop, trying to get on the Vidian's tail. But Varys anticipated the move, slicing upward in a vertical climb. Back and forth they went, neither able to gain the upper hand. Vincent's wild maneuvers kept Varys off balance, while the alien's pinpoint accuracy forced Vincent to constantly stay on the defensive. With both ships running low on power, Vincent knew he had to end this. He dove for a nearby canyon, skimming mere feet above the rocks. Varys followed, determined not to let his prey escape. At the last possible second, Vincent cut his engines and fired his maneuvering thrusters, flipping end over end in a move that shredded his stabilizers. As alarms blared in his cockpit, he found himself facing the oncoming Varys. The Vidian had no time to react. He pulled up hard, scraping the canyon wall. When the dust settled, Varys's ship limped in the air while Vincent's hovered unsteadily. I concede," Varys said, his voice heavy with disbelief. Back at the base, Varys addressed the squadron. "I was wrong about Vincent. His methods may be unorthodox, but they work. From now on, we do things his way." The pilots threw themselves into training with renewed vigor. But their newfound unity was about to be put to the ultimate test. Alarms blared across the base. Vincent rushed to the command center to find chaos. The colony was under attack, with the enemy heading straight for them. "Scramble the fighters!" Vincent ordered. "Zaxxon, Varys, on me. The rest of you, form up and engage at will. Remember your training." They took to the skies, immediately swarmed by enemy craft. But where once they might have faltered, Vincent's pilots now moved as one, using every trick he'd taught them. Zaxxon pulled off a daring corkscrew, taking out 2 bogeys in one pass. Varys led a group in a complex weaving pattern that confused enemy targeting systems. Slowly but surely, they pushed the attackers back. Vincent spotted the enemy flagship, the same ship that had decimated Craxus's forces. He grinned. "Time to even the score." "Zaxxon, Varys, cover me," he said, gunning his engines toward a dense field of debris. The flagship followed, its superior weapons pounding Vincent's shields, but the human pilot had a plan. He wove through the debris, setting off a chain reaction of explosions that battered the larger ship. Vincent's fighter took heavy damage in the process. As warnings flashed across his screens, he realized he wouldn't make it out. But he'd accomplished his goal. The flagship was crippled, dead in space. "Zaxxon," Vincent called, "finish the job." The young Vidian didn't hesitate. He led the squadron in a coordinated strike that sent the mighty flagship limping into retreat. The day was won. The smoke had barely cleared from their victory against the enemy flagship when Vincent and his squadron were summoned to Vidian High Command. They filed into the briefing room, still riding high on their recent success. "At ease, pilots," the grizzled admiral growled. "We've got a new assignment for you. Top secret." Vincent leaned forward, intrigued. The admiral brought up a holo display showing a massive shipyard complex nestled deep within a swirling nebula. "This is the heart of the enemy's production capabilities," the admiral explained. "Intelligence says their shields will be down for resupply in 48 hours. It's our best shot at crippling their war machine." Varys's scales paled. "Sir, with all due respect, flying into that nebula would be suicide. The radiation alone would fry our systems." Vincent clapped a hand on Varys's shoulder. "That's what they're counting on, but my pilots can handle it. Right, Zaxxon?" The young Vidian stood tall. "Absolutely, sir. We're ready for anything." As they prepped for launch, Vincent gathered his squad. "Listen up. Once we hit that nebula, we're flying blind. No nav, no targeting. Just your skills and instincts." They nodded, faces set with fierce dedication. As they approached the nebula's edge, static crackled across their comms. Instrument panels flickered and died. Vincent took point, leading them into the roiling clouds. "Stay tight on my 6, he ordered. "Watch for my signal lights." They plunged deeper, buffeted by turbulence. Zaxxon's voice came through, barely audible. "I can't see a thing in this soup." "Trust your training," Vincent replied calmly. "Feel the currents." Suddenly the nebula parted, revealing the sprawling shipyard. Before they could react, automated defenses opened fire. "Evasive maneuvers," Vincent barked. "Weave and bob just like we practiced." The squadron scattered, twisting and rolling to avoid the barrage. Vincent led them in a dizzying assault pattern, confusing the enemy targeting systems. "Bombers, you're up," he called. "Hit those production hubs." As the bombers peeled off, Zaxxon's voice cut through the chaos. "We're taking heavy fire, can't shake 'em!" Vincent saw Zaxxon's fighters retreating under a hail of enemy fire. "Varys, cover them!" Varys's ship lurched as his systems overloaded. Cursing, he gripped the controls. All those endless drills kicked in as he flew purely by feel, pulling off a wild reverse maneuver to reach Zaxxon's squad. With Varys and Zaxxon reunited, they led the battered bombers on their final runs. Explosions bloomed across the shipyard as they unleashed their payloads. As they limped back to the rally point, Vincent's voice rang out. "Outstanding work, people. We just changed the course of this war." Varys pulled his ship alongside Vincent's. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Your methods, they saved us today." Vincent grinned. "Just glad you finally came around. Now let's get home and celebrate." The acrid smell of ozone and burnt circuitry filled the cockpit as Vincent and his pilots limped back to base. Their victory over the enemy shipyards had come at a steep cost, but the elation of success coursed through their veins. As they touched down on the landing pad, cheers erupted from the ground crew. Vincent popped his canopy, sweat-soaked flight suit clinging to his skin. He grinned at Varys, who was climbing out of his own fighter. "Not bad for a bunch of inflexible drones, eh?" Vincent called out. Varys' scales flushed a deep purple. "I suppose your unorthodox methods have some merit after all, human." Their celebration was short-lived. An alarm klaxon blared across the base, cutting through the jubilant atmosphere. Vincent's stomach dropped as he saw the grim expression on the face of the approaching communications officer. "Sir, long-range scouts report a massive enemy armada entering the system," the officer said, voice tight with tension. "They're coming for revenge." Vincent's expression resolute. He turned to his pilots, who had gathered around him. Their eyes were wide with fear, but he saw the steel of drive there too. "All right, people, we've got work to do," Vincent barked. "To your stations, now!" As they scrambled to prepare, Vincent headed to the command center. The holo display showed a sea of red dots approaching their position. It was an overwhelming force, dwarfing anything they'd faced before. The base became a hive of frantic activity. Civilians were herded onto transports while soldiers fortified defensive positions. In the midst of the chaos, Vincent received his orders: buy time for the evacuation at all costs. He gathered his pilots one last time in the ready room. Looking at their faces, some he'd come to know as friends, others still as enigmas, Vincent felt a swell of pride. "When I first came here, you were rigid by the book flyers," he began, pacing before them. "Now you're the finest damn pilots I've ever seen. You've learned to improvise, to think on your feet, and you're going to need every bit of that skill today." Vincent paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "I won't lie to you. The odds are bad, real bad. But remember everything we've been through, everything you've learned. Trust your instincts, watch each other's backs, and we just might pull this off." As Vincent finished speaking, the building shook. Through the windows, they could see the first wave of enemy ships entering the atmosphere. "To your fighters," Vincent ordered. "Let's show these bastards what we can do." They raced to the flight line, the ground trembling beneath their feet. As Vincent climbed into his cockpit, he saw Zaxxon hesitate beside his own fighter. "Sir," Zaxxon called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might give us a chance." Vincent listened as Zaxxon laid out his audacious plan. It was insane, practically a suicide mission. But as he looked at the dedication in the young Vidian's eyes, Vincent knew he couldn't say no. "Do it," Vincent said, clasping Zaxxon's shoulder. "May your ancestors watch over you." As they took to the skies, Vincent watched Zaxxon's fighter peel away from the formation. The young ace accelerated hard, aiming straight for the heart of the enemy armada. "Zaxxon, what are you doing?" Varys's panicked voice crackled over the comm. "Trust me," Zaxxon replied calmly. "I've got this." Vincent's heart pounded as he watched Zaxxon's ship disappear into the storm of enemy fire. For agonizing seconds, there was nothing. Then, a massive explosion bloomed at the center of the enemy formation. "He did it," Vincent breathed. "All right, people, Zaxxon's given us our opening. Let's make it count." Vincent led the charge, diving into the gap created by Zaxxon's sacrifice. The next hours passed in a blur of frenzied combat. Vincent called out orders rapid fire, orchestrating an intricate dance of destruction. "Varys, take your wing high. Flank them from above while we hit them low." Kira Jack's scissor formation cut through their lines. Time and again, Vincent's unorthodox tactics caught the enemy off guard. But for every ship they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. As the battle raged on, Vincent's squadron dwindled. Good pilots, friends, winked out of existence in bursts of fire and debris. Soon, only Vincent and Varys remained, their ships battered and barely holding together. "Vincent," Varys's tired voice came through the static. "We can't hold out much longer." Vincent's eyes darted across his flickering displays. The evacuation wasn't complete. They needed more time. "One last push," Vincent said. "You with me?" "Always," Varys replied. They dove towards the regrouping enemy flagships, weapons blazing. Vincent's fingers flew across his controls. Every lesson he'd taught put into practice in this final, desperate assault. Suddenly, Vincent's proximity alarm screamed. His blood ran cold as he saw the trajectory of the incoming orbital bombardment. In that moment, Vincent made his choice. With a quick prayer to whatever might be listening, he slammed his ship into Varys, sending the Vidian spinning away to safety. As the world around him erupted in blinding light, Vincent allowed himself a small smile. He'd done his job. The evacuation ships were away. His pilots, his friends, would live on to fight another day. The last thing Vincent saw before the explosion claimed him was Varys's ship, a mere speck now, streaking towards the stars and whatever future awaited. In that final instant, Vincent knew that his legacy would live on through the pilots he'd trained. They would carry his teachings, his spirit of innovation and daring, to the far reaches of space. And perhaps someday, they would return to reclaim their home.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.